Welcome to the Paperless Productivity Podcast, where we have experts give you the insights, know-how, and resources to help you transform your workplace from paper to digital, while making your work life better at the same time.
My name is Brad Smith, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. Last April, we provided a bonus podcast episode of Justice Knows No Quarantine, which discussed the challenges that the pandemic would present to civil and criminal courts in 2020. In today's episode, Jim McMillan, Principal Technology Consultant at the National Center for State Courts, joins us a year later to discuss the continued challenges, new technologies that evolved due to the pandemic, and funding options in 2021 and beyond. Thanks for joining us today, Jim.
Thank you, Brad.
Hey, and to let the audience knows, Jim and I have known each other for, over 25 years. I could say over 30, but that would just sound wrong. And we've been talking quite a bit over the last 2 or 3 weeks about some of the challenges and some of the new things that courts are dealing with. And one of the things that popped up when it comes to the pandemic and courts opening up fairly recently is caseload catch-up. And I didn't really understand that terminology that maybe the National Center has been using, but Jim, could you kind of describe that real quickly on what is being done and how the National Center may be able to address that with other courts?
Sure. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, we've got a big backlog. There's a whole lot of cases that need to get done. So we just have to get out there and figure out and be creative about how we're going to address it. And we always say in the court world, you can throw money or you can throw bodies at a problem. So I've worked with different courts down through the years, and it's like, yeah, double the staff in the registry or the clerk's office. But, in this case, we may actually have to do that. And that means that we have to look for funding as to how we're going to pay for people to come and work. But we also need facilities. So I did an article about 2 months ago where I was trying to figure out how would you approach the catch-up project, I would call it. So, the idea first, of course, is you got to estimate your workload. How many cases do you have to do? What's the complexity? How hard are those cases? What kind of resources are needed for those cases? So, that's a little bit of project planning, and that's appropriate in this case. And so now we've got to figure out how much time and how much resources, what type of people. Can we maybe do a quick investment or do a contract for online dispute resolution if there's simpler types of matters? And there's also, if there's simpler types of matters, maybe there's some court rules that you can use, you can implement and change to speed things along. But if you need judges, if you need bodies, then now we have to start looking at judge pro tems, volunteer attorney judges, that sort of thing, to come in and hear those matters. And you also have to find the facilities, find the place for them to hold their hearings. So perhaps some of that can be done online. That would be good. It makes it a lot easier, and hiring the local attorneys or attorneys from some other part of the state could be certainly done, and it might be easier to do that. But if you've got to bring them to the county seat to your courthouse, then that's a whole nother plan.
Okay, quick question with that. I know that you guys provide consultant services and certainly have done a lot of work with the IGIS Institute and the Courts Advisory Committee. Are you seeing that, during the pandemic, that courts are reaching out to you that much more, or has it been about the same and their own little IT staffs are just scrambling to get people remote and set up for what you just described?
Well, there's been a lot of conversation. There's been a lot of training and a lot of discussions and lots of different people experimenting and trying things out. I've been a member, not a super active member, but a member of the Online Courtroom Project out in California. And what's been fascinating about that group is that it's mostly trial technology consultants, assistants, people that come in and in the old days would be facilitating the video playback or the PowerPoint slides and, just basically holding the attorney's hands with the technology. Now, of course, they're doing all the online web conferencing and video and, making those things happen. So basically serving as a technology courtroom clerk. So that's really been interesting because now we're seeing a whole new job, we can say job position in the court. Some of those also are being done by courtroom staff and court staff that are coming in. But I haven't really seen, the people in California are the ones that are coming in and they're doing it on a contract basis for civil cases in a lot of instances. So, the thing is that we probably now need to start looking at making those positions permanent and having a formal personnel structure for all of those people, because I don't think it's going away. The online is going to be here forever and ever. And we just can't pretend that the poor judges have to be able to run that. They actually have a full-time job. They've already had a full-time job. They don't need that full-time job on top of what they're doing. And you want the stuff to work. That's why we need that staff and those people to work and make sure that the remote systems are working properly, that people can hear each other, kind of important things. So that's something that's really been interesting to see develop over the last year, because I don't know that it actually existed before that time.
When it comes to Zoom, are you seeing certain things that they're utilizing it for? Is it, hearings? Is it probation? Is it guilty pleas? Is there some set best practice that have been expressed to you?
Yeah, I think, the obvious one, the easy one has been hearings, has been procedural hearings, have been, the straightforward stuff that's really attorney to judge and back. It's when you start getting into the defendants and the clients that things start getting to be much more complex. And of course, the judge in the court is watching out for the rights of the people, of the participants, the parties in the case. So that's where you get a lot more caution, which is appropriate for this
Right.
sort of thing. So, but that's fine because that's a small percentage of what we do in the courtrooms every day, because we do so much procedural stuff. So that's why it's really perfect to do that online and why that's not going away. It's just really, really been fantastic how that's all worked out. The other aspect of it that I've always said was that certain scientific evidence should have always been done on video. I always think it's terrible to have the state crime lab scientists spend days waiting to testify in a hearing matter when they're testifying on the procedure and the processes they use to determine the evidence. Well, that's very straightforward. Everybody's professional. You don't need the majesty of the courtroom to get the demeanor and the truth out from the scientist. They're fine. They're going to be able to go and do that and be available, be working in the lab, and only called to the courtroom when they're needed on the web conference. So, all of that kind of stuff, we just have to be very intelligent and smart about how we're doing things. Another one is, shall we say, non-standard language interpretation. If you've got somebody that comes in with a language that's not easy to find an interpreter in your location, then it makes perfect sense to do that on web conferencing. And it's much better to do it with web conferencing with the video, because then the language interpreter can see the person, can see them speak, can that facial interaction, that facial, what can I say, how they look, how they say things makes all the difference. So that's where we can also be able to speed things along, because we can get access to those resources.
Right. I think what's always been interesting is when you were talking about having, more people on the technical side or specialists, we get into that situation as well, going to various locations, and it's always helpful. I'll have a sales engineer be in Austin, Texas, for example, and I'll be in Nashville, and we'll be meeting with a client, but we set up a either a go-to meeting or a WebEx or a Zoom, and then we have the conversation. And it's always good to, as you were mentioning, to just to be in person so you can see if they have a quizzical look, or if if they're kind of like raising their hand and they're not quite sure if they should interrupt or not. You can quickly chime in. But you were mentioning, I think when we were talking the other day, and to all our podcast listeners, one place to go just to get really cool articles is something that Jim puts together called the Core Technology Bulletin. I highly recommend going to that location. I check it out all the time. I don't tell Jim that not to make him feel so awesome, but it is amazing stuff. But one of the things that you pointed out in one recent article was the psychology of being in person. And if you can kind of flesh that out in like a quick Clip Notes version of what that article was about, that would be great.
Yeah, it's really fun because when I get to talk to my judges, when I'm talking to my judges, they're of course very comfortable. They love their courtrooms and things. But what they've also pointed out is that their experience in being on video versus having people in person is very different because, and you don't want to say that the courthouse is an intimidating place because it really is. But you're
Oh,
also
it's
taking
friendly.
people out of their comfort zone. And by taking them out of their comfort zone and being in the reality of being in the courthouse, now this is a different psychological kind of say environment weight on a person that definitely changes behavior. Now, hopefully, it changes behavior for the positive, and my judge friends think that that's very true. But you can also look at it as being super intimidating for younger persons that may be involved in a court case. And so we've also spent a lot of time setting up or having chambers hearings, having less intimidating environments than the traditional courtroom. Because traditional courtroom's set up to be, very hierarchical, the power of the king. And, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of English courtrooms, but the judges are way high up on their benches. That's definitely designed that way for that purpose. So there is that psychology. Now, it can be used for good and it can be used for bad, but it's definitely there and something that we have to appreciate in comparison, of course, to the web conference approach to doing things. So that's why web conferencing is so great, because now this gives us another set of tools for how we can work with people. And, I don't know if you do it for truth telling or for impressing the seriousness of a court matter with them, but there's all these aspects that have to be considered and thought about.
Everything you said about being in a courtroom, and I've been doing this for 32 years now, and I don't care who you are, if you are in the courtroom setting and you're there for a particular proceeding, one of the amazing things I heard from judges was that they really liked ODR because they realized that it is intimidating and they may not get a full response. And but in an ODR setting, it allows individuals in the comforts of their own home to explain in detail what their issue is, and then have a dialogue back and forth where if you have literally 100 people in what we would call a cattle call session in Texas, you certainly you certainly don't feel comfortable explaining your whole problem. And so I think that that's where technology certainly has a way of working both ways. We were talking about earlier when you mentioned funding and projects and how do we go about this. And I think you and I have discussed offline, how do we go and look at different pricing models? I think the term you used was case surge and funding, dynamic pricing, and virtuous cycle. Could you explain what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, I was looking, of course, we have a great opportunity with this COVID recovery funding that's coming out of the state and the federal government to do things right now, to go in and retrofit in your courtrooms or rebuild things, introduce all kinds of new technology. So that's fun. That's really great because we're going to have this one-time injection of funding, I hope, I think, is what it looks like. But the problem is, of course, is then we have to maintain the systems. So sure, we can go make a nice step up, nice jump, but then we have to maintain it. We got to have it be it sustainable. So again, you got to pay for that technology bailiff. You got to go and have the equipment fixed, after 5 years on your computers or your audio systems. So the stuff just does not once you pay for it, does not stop. The payments don't stop. So I started thinking about and reading about what other industries do, and they have these things called surge pricing. So if you, I think we all know about rush shipping. So if you want something, you absolutely need to have it done that day, then you pay for it. We all know about being food delivery and that sort of thing. So the thing is that I've never seen anybody actually do this, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to have the discussion is saying, okay, I've got a last minute motion. I really need to have this done now because there's these, X, Y, and Z problem. Then maybe there is a surge price. Maybe there's an extra, the surge fee to make sure that the clerk can be able to, the court and the judge can be able to address it. Or we add the resource that we were talking about earlier. So I just think that there's a way that things that we have not considered that other businesses do that is very common, obviously, rush shipping, that we really haven't explored in the courts. And I think it's worthwhile having that discussed and considered. And of course, make lots of dividing lines. I'm not talking about, having the surge pricing to you deny somebody's rights or discriminate between different people, the haves and the haves not. What I'm talking about is people that can afford that and need to do it, that maybe there's a way for us to meet that customers, those parties, those attorneys' demands. It's worth a discussion and thinking about.
Well, and I think that the discussion part, and unfortunately, we would do this at our core technology summits, which, whether it be CTC, which is fine, eCourts, which is fine. I really felt when we did the court summit, when you had individuals from National Center, you had individuals from either IT professionals, CIOs, court administrators, as well as vendors, all meet to discuss these certain issues. I personally felt like it was probably some of the best conversations, which, as you know, sometimes those conversations, I wouldn't say heated, but I would say passionate. So, and I think that that's one thing that we all need to accomplish as we keep moving forward during 2021 and 2022. The other thing is with this new grant funding, which you were speaking of, a lot of locations, smaller courts, they don't even know where to begin when it comes to at least getting the grant applications fulfilled or knowing where to start. Is there some place or is there some method that you're using at the National Center which people can get an eye on, and or at least a web page or a link that they can go to help themselves out?
Sure. There's actually on my Core Technology Bulletin blog, there's a links section, link to links toward the top. And there we have the links back to the National Center's standards. And we use the standards a lot in formulating our request for proposals and other planning documents. So those are all really good. I also think that there's projects like what Ohio is doing with technology grants coming down from the state. So, and I remember some other states were doing that as well. where, there was like innovation grants to go out there and try and work, give some funding to the local courts to move things forward. And of course, Utah's legal sandbox is the classic one going on right now, where they're creating a special legal entities where people can try out innovative things. And it's really fantastic. So that's like some of the ODR, but now as they say, the next generation of online dispute resolution, some of which may have been prevented because of court rule or statute. Well, Utah's out there experimenting with it. They have to submit a plan, and they don't just get to do anything they want, but it gives them the area to go and work and try those things out, and even some funding. And that makes all the difference, because you go out there and create new ways to provide services to people and improve their access to justice, which is one of the big key topic areas, focuses, I think, of most court systems nowadays, is to looking for those opportunities and those improve that ability to access justice. Since I'm going to my access to justice thing, I'll go and talk about that real quick. The issue we've got with access to justice for the private world, the private side, is that we have to really determine what's going to be public access and what's not going to be public access, because you just can't turn on all the court records out to the public. What we need to do is to determine and have a rule set, and then build software, build technology around what can you search for, what's available to who, when is it available? Is there an ability to pull that data back or make it unavailable? There's just so many questions that are out there, and there's answers, but we just need to get real serious about how we're going to provide data to the researchers, to the data providers, just all those types of things. And I just don't know where the dividing lines are yet. And we just haven't
Yeah,
gotten into that, haven't made those decisions.
yeah, I know. I mean, as you know, that in my past years, I was working with a company that provided redaction software, and one of the things, as you probably know as well, I mean, Florida is probably one of the more strict locations when it comes to public records. And Manatee County put up their records on their website as a test project, almost a pilot for the state of Florida. And one of the unique ways that they provided their access to the information, which would require redaction, is they would show kind of the docket index. Someone would go in, they would do a search. It would go to a law clerk in terms of a workflow. The law clerk would then run it through the redaction software and then post it. So it wouldn't be immediate, but the access to that information would get to them within a day or so. And then the next time someone requested that same document from that same case, then it would be available on the web because it's already gone through the process. So it was a way of kind of being a compromise between the two worlds of access to justice as well as privacy and public records.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff just gets, it gets to be really difficult. And that's a really good, I like that solution, because now you're into a review system. Of course, that's I would say, personnel intensive. So that's where you get into it's like, well, that might work for a few things, but you can't really scale that one real quick, real high for doing stuff. But then again, like I was mentioning earlier, once that data gets pulled, let's just say you've got a record for a young person, and the young person is then able to get the record sealed. Well, that data has already been taken by the commercial providers and copied and recopied and sold and resold. And now we got to try to pull this back into a quote sealed record. Good
Yep.
luck.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
a
That
lot of
well,
cookie crumbs.
Well, that's CourtLink. LexisNexis CourtLink would do that kind of stuff, and they do have technology to refresh it, as it were. But when
Mm.
we're talking about new technology that we're facing now, and as we go towards 2021 and beyond, one of the things that have been popping up, and we've had this in various forms, is digital evidence management. And I didn't know if you have been seeing certain things that is out there and dealing with obviously body cams, and you're having videos from Ring doorbells and people's cell phones, and how the court manages that. Is there certain things that you've seen out there that really make you think that, hey, this is going to be some really interesting things, and or is this definitely going to be something we're going to have to deal with as we move forward in the future?
Oh, I think it's the latter. We've got to definitely deal with it. From right now, what I've seen is that most courts that I've seen have given up. They're just basically letting, the police have their body cam video systems, which are out on the cloud, and they're letting them manage all of that. Now, we do get clips, and one of the things that I've been wanting to do is to apply a digital signature. So you have a technician, and technician has, 10 hours of body cam video that came down from Apex or one of the body cam video web cloud systems. So, but you really only need like 2 minutes of it for that particular event. What we need to do is have the ability for the technician to do the clip and then digitally sign it. And that's what I want as the court. I don't want the other 9 hours and 50 minutes or 55 minutes. I want the
Right,
clip and I want it signed so that then when it goes to Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court and then the US federal courts, all those things are all in that piece of evidence of digital evidence is a signed piece of data. And
right.
so I've got an article on my blog about how Brazil does some of this for their documents. So Brazil has had a digital signature capability since around 2009. So if you go to my blog, type in Brazil and go take a look at the article, because it's actually quite interesting as to how they do stuff. And because I had Brazilian judges coming to visit, and so that's why I stumbled on it, because I stumbled on one of the judges. I looked her up, and there was, some of her decisions that were all digitally signed. And so I asked them about it, and they said it's working great. So those are things that, there's all these pieces that still need to be put together.
Well, there's a product out there, and you might want to take a look at it, Jim. It's called Input Ace, which
Oh, I don't know that.
allows people, and fantastic product. And what it is it's more or less an editing tool for video management, not only for the courts, don't get me wrong, I mean, but it's also for the law enforcement and public defenders, prosecuting attorneys, where, as you mentioned, you could be looking at hours and hours of video, and yet the perpetrator only, and or the offense only occurred during a 5-minute window.
Yeah, how
And
much Dunkin' Donut purchases can you watch? Just
a-
small. I'm sorry.
absolutely, absolutely. It's what it ends up doing is it allows them to go in and then make the edits and then package it up as a part of discovery and to be
Good.
shared with all parties involved. And so take a look at that when you get a chance. Input
That's
Ace,
cool.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really
And
good.
they do go through an amazing process of ensuring, with hash marks and hashtags, that that this is the true version, because of course you're going to get public defenders or private attorneys that are on the defense side that will try to challenge the authenticity of that particular video, and it's amazing. So please do take a look at it. One of the last things that you and I had discussed, and I'll probably add one more just because that's who I am,
Sure.
is you were bringing up AI, speech to text, OCR. Now, don't get me wrong, having dealt with judges with AI Smart Bench and judicial dashboards, more than a few times I would get people saying, hey, wouldn't it be great that if I can look for, a motion that discussed slip and fall cases, blah, 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 in a sense of just verbally requesting it versus having to use natural language searching with Westlaw or Lexis, or even Boolean searching if they were old school.
Exactly. The thing is, so artificial intelligence has, good sides and bad sides to it right now. And a lot of it is of course related to the training set of data that you provide to it. But the speech to text area of technology has really just taken off and been really fantastic as to what they've been able to build. And there's all the big technology companies have been putting, work into this area. And what has happened now is that obviously, like we all are used to now calling up onto the speakerphone on our mobile phone and talking to the remote call system. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is that you have a system that is either watching out or discreetly starting, give it a touch screen or hit a key or get a mouse click to respond to your command and or transcribe what you're saying. And all of this is very, very possible now. It's getting to be very powerful. I've got a company that I have been working with called Otter AI. It's out of Europe. And they usually put up a different type of demo from time to time on YouTube where you can watch and see how accurate it is, either for a web conference or right now for the trial in Minnesota. And you can watch and see the computer transcribing what is being video displayed, web conferenced. This is really great stuff. And so you've got 2 points. You got the command piece, which means that you have your judge being able to ask the computer or to have it do something, fill out the form, pull up data, all of those kinds of things. And then you've got the transcription piece, which is really amazing, is very powerful. So there was an article that just showed up today that was, what can I say, a caution about this AI work, because they were saying that it's using a massive amount of computing resources, which then of course means that you're using fossil fuels. So this was their criticism. What can I say? They should use the data center next to the Columbia River that Microsoft has gone and fired up. I mean, there are answers to this stuff, but it does take a lot of computing power, which is what AI is. It just requires these huge data sets. So the other thing I just wanted to throw out there that Brad, that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, everybody's always worried about accents from Boston or from Georgia. And what's really funny is that my friends that are in this area have pointed out that Georgia accents have been used to train the AI for the speech recognition. So the test was Senator Sam Nunn from Georgia. And so you can play Senator Sam Nunn's speech from whatever it was in the Senate, and it does a great job because it's been trained to understand Sam Nunn. So accents, it can deal with accents. It's just a matter of the training set.
Well, there you have it. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Louisiana, and now, of course, they always call me a Yankee, but that's fine. But their accents are fairly strong as well. I know that they create a knowledge base when they're doing that AI situation, which has to be very solid, I imagine.
Exactly.
Hey, one last thing, Jim. I was gonna, because we had mentioned Zoom and new technology. I have seen, as we were kind of talking about certain companies and certain really interesting next level approaches, a company called Philo.co. So that's FILO. And you may have met one of the individuals, Doug Rybacki, who used to work at LexisNexis and had worked with it. Yeah, and Doug is fantastic. But what they ended up doing is their product takes the Zoom to the next level, where it creates rooms, security bound rooms where a judge and or a prosecuting slash district attorney and a public defender and a probation office all could be participating and yet negotiating with judges in a secure manner. So it's just taking it to the next level, which I think is fantastic. Have you seen things like that as well, where it's a fairly common technology, but there's someone else that does that special twist? Maybe you may have seen it with Utah.
I saw it in Texas where they started to use the breakout rooms functionality in Zoom, and the other conferencing companies are jumping onto that too, because you want to have control, but also have the ability to do the breakout and go ahead and have the private conversations. So yeah, no, that's a really fantastic thing, because now you're providing multiple channels for people to have discussion and present and share information. Yeah, we're just going to see more and more development in those areas, which is going to be fantastic.
Well, Jim, thank you once again. I've taken up way more than your time that you were going to give us, and I appreciate that so much. But for our listeners, be sure to review the podcast show notes for resource materials and to download this podcast episode. If you'd like to learn more about ImageSoft, please visit our website at imagesoftinc.com. This concludes this podcast. Take care and have a great day.
Thanks again for joining us on this podcast. To learn more about ImageSoft, please visit imagesoftinc.com. That's imagesoftinc.com. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to Paperless Productivity, where we tackle some of the biggest paper-based pain points facing organizations today. We'll see you next time.